How you doing, guys? It's Ace Alfalo over here with FMO Media, CEO and founder. I'm sitting here with quite a few gentlemen who are helping bring to life the energy world. Leading the call, we have actually Ron Pickett, who is the CEO of KiNRG. And then we have two other gentlemen, Chris Marshall and George, also joining us. Welcome to the show, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ace.
So absolutely. So I like to do it for people that may not know who you are. I feel that it would be good to start with maybe a 1-2 minute bio for your background, what you're bringing to the table, and how you ended up, working and bringing to life KiNRG. Why don't we start with you, Ron, and then we'll move over to Chris and then move over to George.
Okay, well, I'm Ron Pickett. I'm the CEO and the founder of KNRG. We started this about 8, 9, almost 10 years ago from the concept, and it's been a building process. And different people we brought in along the way with their expertise. And these gentlemen sitting here with us today were early on involved in the whole concept of the project, the whole concept of the tower, the science behind it. And that was our building block. Until we knew what was going to happen inside the tower, we couldn't figure out how much wind it would make, how much energy there was, or whatever. So George and Chris were very, very early on first participants to advise me and help me see if this was going to have any legs, quite frankly. What happens? What's the science here? What's the meteorological aspect of this? What makes this work? And so without them, we wouldn't be here today.
Awesome. Thanks for that, Ron. And Chris, why don't we discuss your role in the company?
Sure. My role in the company is as a consultant. I'm also good friends with Ron and George. We're all here in Wilmington, North Carolina. And George and I actually met as a result of us both being on television and in meteorology, which led to what Ron, was looking for expertise in that area. So we did a couple of trial runs and learned that, this system works. So I have expertise in weather stations, weather systems, IT, and not as much as George does in weather or meteorology, but together we're enough to be dangerous. I also own a .com right now, which actually applies some of that, and a small IP camera company as well here in Wilmington, North Carolina.
Awesome. And George, yourself, I would love to hear your expertise and your role in the company.
I actually started when I was about 10 or 11, so I got them all.
Wow.
Ron didn't know it at the time, but I turned my hobby from 11 years old, eventually thinking that one day I'm going to do, and this is true. I'm a weather nerd from when I was born, just about. And I studied expertise in forecasting, analysis, and also modeling and long-range forecasting. I dealt with and learned from the old school right up to the new school. But here's something I wanted to say right off. If you're a weather nut, there's a couple of things you always think about, not just the forecasting and all the fun and stuff of the storms and watching, but we always talk about one day, what if we can harness all this energy in these storms, lightning, and we knew as meteorologists that how do we harness thunderstorm, all this energy out there? And you know what? We knew we could, because it's nature. And it's how do we take nature and use it to our advantage? And so through my years, that's always been something that's always in the back of my head. In all my forecast years, and in my analysis years, in my literature years, I wrote and published. And about 10 years ago, Ron approached me and I said, oh yeah, count me in. He didn't even have to tell me what it's about other than clean energy as related to downdraft winds.
Got it. Thank you for that, George. And before we dive into the technical questions, I thought whoever wants to take this question, what just as an overall 50,000 foot view, what is KiNRG technology all about? If we can get the overview, couple of sentence answer to that before we dive into the technical stuff. Does anyone want to give that? Anyone want to give the general overview? Is that Ron?
I think, frankly, I think that's probably a George question.
Okay.
actually, these guys are being modest. They were TV personalities. They were the meteorologist on our local station there in Wilmington. That's how I knew who they were. Now, we didn't know personally until I saw them on TV and whatnot. And so I ran into Chris one time at a little place. We started talking. And then when this came up, I called Chris about, hey, look at this idea of what's going to happen inside this tower. And he said, "Oh, that's very interesting. I get it. But you got to talk to George Elliott." I said, "This guy is a brainiac. He's a brainiac. He's been studying this all of his life. He's with the Weather Channel. He's written papers on this." He said, "He's the guy you need." And I needed somebody to interpret what I was hearing from these cloud scientists. I mean, they speak in algorithms. That's another language. So when I would go out and meet with the experts, I had to have George with me to understand what they were saying. It's highly technical. So George could dumb it down for me and to get it to where I could understand it and get my arms around it and process it. So George can explain. George really should explain what was this thing in the tower, rather than me. He's the expert.
What impressed you the most, George, when Ron first approached you? I think would be a great question to start with. What made you want to get involved in the project?
Besides what he was wearing, something more. I'll tell you what, even non-meteorologists have experienced thunderstorms. And it could be a thunderstorm a mile, 2 miles or more away, and you feel a cool rush of air. We've all experienced that. If you were under that thunderstorm that produced that gust of cold air, you would be under a microburst or big downdraft of air coming from the thunderstorm. How's that happen? And what if we can harness that energy in there? Well, that is caused by evaporative cooling. And we know the equations for evaporative cooling. We forecast weather every day. The Earth is driven by weather systems from the latent heat of vaporation and evaporation and jet streams, which are caused by temperature and moisture differentials. That's what drives the energy base, the energy of all the globe. Only take a little piece. See if we could take that and put it into a system which Ron discussed with me and told me what the ideas and the analysis were from years ago. They were developing this idea. It just wasn't ready for prime time. Well, yes, you can put this into a tower, and tower iterations and designs have come a long way with Ron's team. We can model a thunderstorm without the lightning and the hail and create that downdraft with evaporative cooling and funnel that air into systems that will generate an electricity. And we'll get into more details on that later as we speak. But
absolutely. Great.
And cooling. We've all felt it. You step out of a shower, you cool off. Why is that? It's taking energy from the water molecules, cooling you. Bingo. The air is actually sinking right around your body. Amazing. It's technically, it sounds complicated. Not so much. Water evaporates. Have you noticed that since you've been alive? Water evaporates.
I have noticed that. I don't know the science of how it gets done, but I'm sure you're going to explain it in about a second. And I'm going to come back to you, George, for the first question. Chris, how about you? What was the first thing that drew you into the project when you were first approached?
I think it was a combination of, does this work? Trying to answer that question, the curiosity of it. Can this work? Fundamentally, like George and Ron just said, the formulas are there, but the system wasn't. So we needed to find a way to prove it. And in meteorology, what you do is you have to measure, in order to get proof, which we call data, humidity, wind speed, temperature. Those are just some of the sensors that we can measure. And we did it. So we did a trial run up in Virginia. And sure enough, we started producing a downdraft. And, it wasn't the end all system, but it was just proof that if we put water droplets into a dry atmosphere at the top of a tunnel, that it was going to create pressure, AKA wind. And if we could, and it had to escape from somewhere. And so that was the beginning of it. And it worked. And it was exciting to be a part of that.
Awesome. So let's go to the first question. I don't know if this is for you, Chris or George, but how and why does the dried air climate best suit KiNRG's towers?
I'll take that. Call me.
You're in, George. Tag you in.
To maximize evaporation, you need dry air. You know, you're out in Phoenix and it's 150 degrees and it's dry. It doesn't feel quite as warm as 150 degrees with 80% humidity. The reason that feels that way is because the air is so dry, you are easily evaporating any moisture on your skin. So it keeps you cool. The evaporative process takes heat energy away from your body and cools the surface. So key, warm, dry air. Because if you could spray water particles at the top of the tower, near the top of the tower, we know that if it's dry enough and warm enough, that those particles, little tiny water particles, it will instantly begin to evaporate. And as they evaporate, they cool the air. And cool air is heavier and denser than the surrounding warm air. So outside the tower, it's hot. Inside the tower, evaporative cooling has already commenced within minutes of spraying. I mean, literally, because it's hot and dry. The water evaporates. And as soon as that happens, the air starts to sink. And as more evaporation takes place, the air accelerates its downward flow. Downdraft, remember that from a thunderstorm? The downdraft, eventual downburst hits the ground. Well, in our case, it goes down to the bottom of the tower. And it doesn't spread out and destroy neighborhoods because it's going through tunnels. What's in those tunnels? Turbines. What do the turbines do? They eventually generate electricity. So you've got this tremendous downdraft spreading laterally at the base, like hitting the ground, all contained in the tower and controlled by us, the human. So now we're taking control of a small climate within the tower. And the warmer, the drier, the better. Interestingly, it never stops working unless it's totally cold and wet and just saturated. And it only decreases, but it will always produce something. And you should see the amount of energy when it's hot and dry. Can you imagine? Out west, hot and dry, just continuous evaporation, sinking air. You got thunderstorm, it's like a thunderstorm continuously spreading out downbursts. It's really, that's cool.
Interesting and very cool. Chris, anything you want to add to that, or?
Yeah, no, I was just imagining you take a place, like the desert Southwest or really any desert. And we keep hearing about global warming and things getting hotter, but even in history, as far as we have been reporting, it's hot and dry. It's the perfect climate. You take a place like Death Valley, you take, Arizona, New Mexico, parts of Utah, Nevada, they are just prime. And, at this time and space that we're in now, we're looking for alternative energies. So like George mentioned earlier, it wasn't sort of the right time when we were proving the concept because things needed to happen for it to become the right time. And I feel like now it's ready and it's exciting because everything's lining up. It's green and it works 24/7, just like some of the other renewable energies don't do that because you have to rely on wind or solar, and you can only get so much capacity out of it. This is different in that sense. So it's really exciting, and it all started with an idea, and it's amazing to see it come to fruition.
Chris makes a good point, and I'll throw it to Ron for this because the science is, the atmosphere has always been what it is. The science, the mathematics, the calculus, the physics have always been what it is. And as time went on, as you can see, you can forecast hurricanes, days in advance now. So the evolution of the equations, et cetera, needed to make this happen continue to exponentially almost expand. Now, also, as Ron can tell you, not only that, but the ability to build structures such as this which we couldn't do whatever years ago or couldn't do in the fashion. Ron's taken this thing from way high and actually shrunk it, designed it in certain ways that couldn't have been done before today's age. Am I saying this true, Ron?
Well, yeah, the whole thing here is that the tower, what happens in the tower is pure science. It's not a technology, so to speak. I mean, it's just pure science. You can't, when you take a certain temperature and a certain humidity in that air, you add water to it, we can't make any more of a downdraft or any less of a downdraft. It is what it is. You can't stop it. You can't change it. It's the atmosphere is going to make, Mother Nature makes this happen. You can't change it. Now you can put less water in, you'd have less downdraft. But if you actually put the full amount of water in for that dry air, that's what you're going to get. And it's predictable. It's predictable to the minute. It takes so long for this to occur. The velocity is pure science. It's going to be this much velocity. When you reduce it in the tower and you squeeze it into the tunnels, your velocity is linear. It's going to be exactly what it is. It happens when the sun sets. We still have hot, dry air. We're still making power. So that's what's so cool about this. It's not something that's a mystery or there's no widgets to this. It's not some magic technology. It's just pure science. It's predictable. And you know what it's going to be. And with the help of the meteorologist, and then when we got to the tunnels, the science, the wind scientists, and then we had to have mathematicians get involved to marry all these programs. But each one of these steps comes together with someone with their expertise, and it's all based on pure science. Nobody waved a magic wand. It's just pure science and pure nature.
I love that. I love that, Ron. Pure science. Let's jump into the how does KiNRG's internal components lead to energy efficiency? Water injection systems, turbines, et cetera. Who wants to take that question? George, it's in your park. Ball's in your court.
What I'll say about that before tossing actually to Ron is when you inject water, okay, and Ron alluded to this, that we have the capacity to decrease amount of evaporation within the system, depending upon the meteorological conditions. All those are measured, all that is science, true. And the downdraft itself is what it is, and it does occur. When that downdraft spreads laterally into the tunnels, and those tunnels are designed very specifically, as Ron said, by engineering, mathematicians, and designers. And then that flows into a series of turbines, which Ron will talk about. And the systems of turbines are such that extraction of energy has become way beyond the original efficiency that science thought would be the case, because we now know that there are ways to harness energy in various capacities that we couldn't do before, but we can now.
Thank you on that. Anything you want to add to that, Chris or Ron?
I think it's George is right.
Yeah.
There's a lot of technical stuff in between there, like the turbine blades, things like that. But the simplicity is any turbine in there is going to spin. We can make it a little better by tweaking the blade configuration or maybe flattening out the blade at the end because it's in a tunnel. And all those things were refinements to this. But the system works. You can't stop the system. You can't stop this unless you turn the water off.
Got it. And actually leads us to the next question. I don't know if you would answer this, Ron, or what's so unique about the natural evaporation environment that the towers provide? Because I know you're just talking about the science. I don't know if that would be a you or a George question.
I don't think there's anything unique about it. It's just natural again. That's the whole purpose.
Yeah.
It's getting the system built, right? I mean, it's going to work. That's what's going to really be the tipping point.
Just like there's right this minute, there's about 2,000 thunderstorms occurring on Earth. 2,000 thunderstorms. So there's nothing unique about downdraft energy. And what we have is a contained system of downdraft energy. So it's like, it just does happen. It's just that we are capturing it in a tower. instead of let it fly through across, there's thunderstorms all over the place. We're modeling the evaporative processes that occur in a thunderstorm in nature naturally in a contained, controlled environment. And you can put these, as Chris was mentioning, anywhere it's warm and dry. You talk about Asia, parts of the Mideast, Australia, South America, southwestern U.S. I mean, there's a heck of a lot of acreage out there that are prime for these kind of evaporative towers, evaporative cooling towers.
Got it. And I guess to like the average person trying to understand it, because obviously the science is there, right? That the environment's already being created to facilitate what's already going to happen, right? And I guess the difference between solar and then a windmill, right, versus KiNRG, I guess for the average person trying to understand, right, and looking at it, it's like, okay, you need wind for one, you need the sun for the other. How does it naturally produce? You're putting it where the temperature can win, but how does that actually come together, in that environment? So there's no wind needed. It's just strictly based on the temperature plus the water that's being produced by the towers. Can you just walk the average person through understanding how that all comes together to make sense of it?
I've got wind blowers out here now doing lawn work, so I
I'll take a shot at that.
Sure, go for it, Chris.
So basically, you find a warm, dry climate. Let's just take Arizona, for example. You take a state like that. You're building a structure, so you're going to have to make sure that you find the right spot. Which in Arizona, it's warm, it's dry most of the state. So you find the right spot. Then you've got to build it. So you're going to build a tower. Everybody's driven down the highway, seen what looks like a smokestack. You don't see as many these days, but the idea, the concept is very similar to that. This is obviously going to be much more modern, larger, and Ron can get into the specifics of that. But it's going to be just a column or tower. At the top of that, you're going to have a water injection system. So you're going to need a water source, and you're going to spray that into the top of it. And it's going to naturally create cooling, evaporation, weight to the air, which is going to sink. And since you're in a tower like a straw, if you blow through one end, it's going to come out the other end. The other end is going to have turbines. And we're going to capture the energy that those turbines create and store it. It's going to create jobs. It's going to be, it's going to be unique in its entirety. And it's going to be 24/7. So to your point about wind and solar, obviously the sun's only up, part of the day. Wind, it doesn't always blow even in windy spaces. This is something where if you have the water and the dry climate, the warm climate, which again is easier to get than producing wind or making the sun come out when it's not supposed to, it's going to work.
Got it. Great explanation, Chris. I'm a real dum-dum, so it's like I'm really visualizing it as it's kind of coming together. That makes sense. Yes, George.
Can you tell me I got a quiet period here? And as Chris was saying clearly, sun is sun, solar energy. Everyone believes the sun is shining, and it's solar energy. You have wind blowing, so I can understand. I got the wind is blowing. I've got windmills. I got the sun. I got the panels on my roof. I got the wind on my backyard. So what's this thing about how does this produce energy all the time? I'll tell you why. Because evaporation occurs day and night. God didn't set up a situation where, and nature didn't set up a situation where evaporation stops at night. Evaporation is not dependent on the sun. It enhances it, and it's not dependent on the wind. So as long as you have evaporation occurring within the tower, you're producing downdraft winds, and downdraft winds hit the bottom of the tower and spread out through the tunnel. So what it is evaporative cooling occurs 24/7. There you go.
Got it. Awesome. So, Ron, anything you want to add on that before we jump to the next question?
No. I think that's the simple,
right on the money.
Simple thing. We're creating wind. I mean, that's what we're doing. We're generating, manufacturing wind, and then we're pushing it through the tunnels, and we're extracting the kinetic energy out of it through a patented system that we developed of multiple turbines, not just one. Yeah. Now, that was a whole nother science unrelated to the meteorological aspect of this, but all of your your wind studies were based on one turbine. One turbine in the field, and the next turbine behind it has to be such a distance, whatever, so they don't interfere with one another. Well, when we went to Georgia Tech, and the experts there, the wind experts, are looking at this, they said, well, the first model, they had one turbine. One turbine. I'll never forget sitting there with the head of the department, the doctor, head of the department. I said, well, what's the velocity of the wind as it hits the first turbine? He says, well, we're about 100 miles an hour. It's the first model we ran. So, well, what's the velocity behind the turbine? He said, well, it's probably, I think, we don't have it exact, I can look it up, but it's probably in the 80s. I said, well, what about that wind? He said, well, the kinetic energy, you can only get so much kinetic energy out of wind, so this wind's not going to have much energy in it. But he said, if you want me to run the model, I'll run it and see. Well, guess what? Now we have 5 turbines. There's that much energy in the wind. On our max days, we're getting winds of 142 miles an hour in the tunnel. These turbines are spinning. All 5 of those turbines are spinning now, extracting a tremendous amount of energy. So there's going to be white papers written about that because that breaks the law. Well, that's law. You can only get 59% of kinetic energy out of wind through a turbine or a propeller. Was in an open environment. And believe it or not, till we started running these tests with Georgia Tech, nobody had ever manufactured wind and forced it through a tunnel and looked at it for more than one turbine.
Wow.
It was just that simple. Simple stuff. There's no magic to this. It's just simple science.
It almost seems like common sense now, right? When it's like, why didn't anybody test it past that point? Right? Now it does.
I'm talking to the guy where every space re-entry that the United States, every device that we ever re-entered from the atmosphere that we fired up and re-entered, this is the team that figured out what was going to happen on that re-entry with the wind around it and the friction and all that. This is the same group that said, well, I don't think more than one turbine is going to work. It was that simple. So, he was as shocked as anybody else. So there it is. Very simple stuff, very simple thought. We just tried it. We just tried it. When the Israelis had looked at this 40 years ago at the Technion, they had one turbine. They hadn't even thought about more than one turbine. It was just one of those off the cuff.
Wow.
Well, what do you think about that? Tried it, and it's been the secret to the efficiency of this.
It's the being in the box versus thinking outside the box.
Yeah,
right?
that's right.
Someone just needed to have another, step outside the tunnel. That's what they needed to do.
Thinking outside the tunnel.
All right. So moving on to the next one. So what impact are fossil fuels having on the state of the environment? And how does KiNRG provide a solution to the problem?
You know what? In case you hadn't noticed, the Earth is pretty warm lately. It's warmer now than it's been. The last time it was this warm was 125,000 years ago. And that's quite a while. And it's obvious to the scientists, and pretty much not everyone, but most people are accepting the fact that humans have increased the rate of warming of the atmosphere. Environments have changed, weather patterns have changed, ice sheets have changed, habitats have been lost and changed and altered. The facts are there that the Earth is warming and accelerating. The models that predicted the warming were under forecasting it. So now we know that's all here. And warming is here to stay, it looks like, for a long, long time. So we got to get solutions now. Because remember back in the 60s and 70s when water was always polluted in the rivers and streams, and it was before the EPA, the Clean Water Act and all that. What if Congress and the public just didn't do anything about it? We'd all be dead from carcinogens in our water, and the lakes would be burning up in the Great Lakes. Buildings would be deteriorating from acid and all that. So here's the deal. Yeah, it's a problem for us now, but it's a problem even tenfold for our future. So we have to do something now. If they didn't act then, we wouldn't be here today. We have to act now. And our system is clean, renewable, zero carbon. We need stuff like that. And it's part of a team of clean energy systems that humanity has to develop. And we're working.
Hey, it's one of the scary things about that. George is absolutely right. Clean Water Act, and we actually had dirty water that we cleaned up, and we're in the process of still doing that. And We had an anti-litter campaign back in the 50s. You know, people used to just throw their garbage out of a car driving down the road. All of a sudden, we put up litter signs. It's not litter. Help our environment. The unfortunate and scary thing is we can arrest this CO2 emission and deterioration of our ozone, which causes the ozone layer, which causes global warming, but we can't fix it. We're not going to make it better. We can only keep it from getting worse. And that's the tragedy here. We need to act now. This isn't something you can wait on, because you're not going to repair the system. You're only going to stop it at some point from getting worse. And for our children and grandchildren, it's pretty scary stuff.
It's huge. I think you would like to think everybody can agree on the problem and what we're doing to fix it, right? And some solutions, obviously, like the one you have here, Ron, are better than others. Chris, anything you want to add to that? Or
I agree with what they both said, and I think that we all interpret global warming differently in a personal level, and you can argue your point. But for me personally, I'm excited anytime I see clean energy, and to see and be part of KiNRG and what they're doing excites me even more, because we actually all had a hand in helping to do it. So it's really exciting. And I mentioned earlier the timing. We need to do something, and we need to do it quickly now. We're seeing that fossil fuels, for many reasons, just aren't really going to work. They're not sustainable. They may have a tiny piece in the future. Who knows? But I'll bet my money on new energy, and this is exactly the type of thing that I would bet my money on.
I will also say on all those points that clean, renewable energy that we produce, and our footprint to produce this is tiny compared to other systems, solar and wind, windmills and such, which we need, of course, all over the world we need it. But our footprint in and of itself is tiny. So that is another aspect of the efficiency of the towers, which is exciting unto itself, just the efficiency of the tower, which we can control.
Love it. And one of the questions I have, and I don't know if this is a question for you guys, maybe Ron can answer, just the question I would just personally like, because I do explain KiNRG to quite a few people. I know one question I get back a lot that I actually don't know the answer to is how much energy does the tower produce? Is it a city? Is it 2 cities? Is it a certain mile radius? And I don't know the answer to that. So I don't know if that's a Ron question or a George question or I don't know.
It's probably a Ron question, but the answer is pretty complex. But
yeah,
I think from a simple standpoint, if you had an average city of about 500,000 people, and that city had normal industry, and gas stations and McDonald's and all those ancillary things that go to support it, not just how many people live there, the whole infrastructure of that. This tower produces more than enough energy to serve that city on an annualized basis. Now, it's not equal every hour. So, you have hours where it produces more than that city needs and hours where it produces less than that city needs. But overall, if you could save it, and there are ways to do that now, and level out, that would take care of a city about that size.
That's great. And that was going to be one of the other things I asked Ron was, I know it's super complex, and I know usually I think like with a car, like the sun technology, right? With like on the panels on your roof, right? Yeah, the panels on your roof, and you save energy for a day when it's not sunny or it's like really cloudy. I was going to ask you how that works out. I don't know if that's a super technical question or how deep down the rabbit hole we go with that. If for any reason I guess like, I don't know if the water or something stopped working, is it able to produce energy for a week or 2 weeks or, until they get the water operational again. And I don't know if there's an answer to that yet, but I'll just stuff them.
We've got redundancy in this. We have a water supply agreement from the city, actually, from their state allocation. And then we have large holding ponds. So we're not just running it from the well straight to the tower.
Yeah.
There's checks and balances in between. And then we recycle about 75% of the water that we recirculate. So that's always in the system. We have water trapped at the top of the tower. So if for some reason, let's say we had a massive downpour of rain, and so we had the tower stopped. Okay, we got over, you couldn't evaporate because the water is just pouring down. Well, then we can restart the tower with the water from that we have captured upstairs rather than have to pump water up to restart it. So there's lots of redundancy in the system like that. Now, the tower location in Arizona only gets 2.5 inches of rain a year. So it's not really possible to get that 2.5 inches in 15 minutes to shut it down. But that, in any event, it's in theory, that's a possibility. But no, the tower has a lot of redundancy in it and has its own ability to restart itself, which is huge.
It's huge. And I know we're coming towards the end right here. So what I wanted to give everybody a chance to do is give everybody a shot to just have a quick information that we weren't able to review. Maybe we'll start with you, George, on just the technology, the science that we weren't able to cover yet. And we'll come to you, Chris, and then back to you, Ron, on any last minute feedback you could possibly give or insight on any information that we didn't get a chance to cover here.
We covered a lot of ground, and most offhand. I want to emphasize again that the towers can be built warm, dry climates, which are in vast areas across our globe. And as a matter of fact, in a way, unfortunately, the vast areas are expanding because of the heating of the earth. Believe me, it used to be that some of these areas that were marginal are now completely suitable. So the areas of the world that have the capability of hosting towers, expansive. The tower itself is natural processes in nature, modeled and controlled. And it works 24/7, and there's no waste. And the water is mostly recycled, and what's not is distributed near the tower to be recycled by the atmosphere itself, back to evaporative cooling in the tower or outside around the tower and complex. So it's an all-win situation. And when it does slow down or shut down, it's not the end of the tower. It is wait a half an hour and it warms right back up, or whatever the case may be, and it restarts. It's almost too easy. It's scary, but it is.
Well, it's definitely not scary. I have a pretty good understanding of it now. And you're right. If we don't do anything about it, we're going to be building these towers in New York soon. All over the place.
The truth is, it's scary if we don't do something like that. The earth is warming. We need to do something yesterday. As the ancient Chinese proverb is, the best time to plant a tree is yesterday. The second best time is today.
Thanks for that, George. Chris, how about yourself?
Yeah, I would second that. And the cool thing about this tower is it's got large tires, so you could just move it wherever you need it to. If it rains too much in one area, just kidding.
Just drive it
kidding. That's not happening. That's not part of the plan.
Yeah.
Just to summarize, we did cover a lot. I think we covered everything, but I think it's exciting for many reasons. Mostly the timing, the technology, and the proof of concept. Those are all solid. Now we just need to build it. We just need to kind of, lay down the rest of the cards, so to speak. And that's happening. It's going to happen. And that's the best, the best part of it is we're going to see something that's going to be meaningful, that's going to be helpful to the environment, that's really going to make a difference.
Like I said, and how about yourself, Ron? Any last insight?
Yeah, one little comment. I think, we're proud to be a part of this renewable contribution, but I'd like to focus on the water for a second, because water is very precious, just like our air and our environment's precious. And we need to conserve water. It's not an endless, thing. So a lot of these towers will be in areas where we'll be using salt water, and we'll actually desalinate that salt water and run it through the tower, and we'll have potable water that we'll be putting back in the ground. So one of the things we didn't really talk about was we're not a user of water. We borrow the water. Like in Arizona, we're borrowing the water from an aquifer. We're running it through the tower. We're recycling most of it. Cold, damp air comes out the tunnels, and it settles right in the ground, just like you were irrigating crops. So that water goes back to the aquifer, even cleaner than when we took it out. So we're not really using the water. We don't have any gray water discharge or any black water discharge, nothing like that at all. So I think it's important for the people thinking about this to understand that we're not impacting or negatively impacting the water quality or the water quantity, if you will. We borrow it, we use it, we put it back.
And that's good to know. It's 100% as green as it's supposed to be, right, Ron? That's
Right.
a big part of it.
Yeah, we probably have electric lawnmowers.
They have them.
They have them. well, thank you guys for being on. We got a lot of information out of this. Please follow KiNRG on all their pages as there's more and more information to come, as this doesn't just turn into proof of concept, but we actually see this follow through and you see this coming towards you, more and more information coming towards your way. So thanks for being on the show, guys, and I'll talk to you soon.